at the beautiful Artistry in the Green at the Inn in Hastings Park on Massachusetts Avenue, and I'm joined by Jim Shaw. Jim, isn't this fun?
This is a blast. I've been involved in politics here in Lexington all my life, and I love the opportunity to sit and talk with candidates about why they want to serve our town, and about the experiences that they've had and what they each bring to the table. So
I agree. It's very impressive when we were preparing for these interviews, all the experience that these
I'm amazed at the level of experience and commitment. You know, when you look at folks like Tom Diaz. Tom, thank you for being with us. You know, Tom's been has served to this community in a lot of various capacities over the years, and 17 years in town meeting, 6 years on the school committee. I don't know if you were you chair when they did the recruitment of Dr. Ash when he came in?
No, okay, I was chair from 2006 to 2008. 2008.
Okay, I can't remember which year he came in, but and you're past chair of the Democratic Town Committee,
right.
And just retired after 6 years in teaching in the Boston Public Schools.
That's right.
So like I said before, we talk with folks with these incredible credentials, and so we're glad you could join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Tom.
Now that we know a little bit about your background, tell us, you've served us in the past very capably and so well, and now instead of sort of going quietly into that dark night, you're coming back and wanting to serve again on the school committee. Why is it so important now?
Well, I went into public school teaching when I was still on the school committee. I entered an internship program in 2008, and being a first-year teacher and a school committee member was far too much work, so I didn't run for re-election. But I had decided when I went into teaching that I probably would teach about 5 years, which I did. I was an intern for a year, and I taught from 2009 to 2014. This year, when I decided to retire on schedule, I thought right away about whether I would get back involved in town government, probably running for the school committee. And by July, I had decided I would run for the school committee the first time I had a chance. I just didn't realize that it was going to happen so quickly. Mary Ann Stewart was appointed by the governor to the State Board of Education, so that opened up this seat rather unexpectedly.
And what would you say, Tom, through your experience of the last 6 years in teaching in the Boston Public Schools, that you've learned through that experience that you could bring foresight into this position on school committee, because you were, as we talked about, already on school committee, but how can this experience that you've just gone through in teaching have a positive impact?
Well, I think teachers and parents will probably understand and appreciate that I've just been a public school teacher in a very modern environment. And what that means is that we have to be as expert in our subject, as sensitive to children, as kind to children, as focused on their individual needs as ever. But there are a lot of additional requirements for licensure, and for example, all the teachers in the state, including me, recently had to complete a certification program to teach English language learners. If you don't do that, you can't renew your license. So I've been evaluated twice under the new statewide performance evaluation system that's in place here in Lexington as well. Very data-driven, modern process. It's not the job of a school committee member to say or specify what goes on in a classroom, but I think the insight I have from being a teacher so recently means I can kind of see inside there and anticipate the effects that some school committee policies would have on teachers, and I think that'll make me a better school committee member than I was before.
Okay. Well, as we talked about your previous experience on the school committee from the years of 2004 to 2010, that committee at that point in time was had many large tasks. One, the search for the superintendent, who was Dr. Ash, and also passing the budget and the new Harrington and Fisk schools took place during that time. So how would you say that your experience through those years will impact if you were to be elected to school committee moving forward, and what's, as we're looking to a new superintendent search?
Well, actually, because this election is in November, it happens to be that between November and March, the school committee has to do two of the same really major tasks that my committee did. One of them is hire a new superintendent. Another is to revise the master school building plan. Both those things pretty much have to be done by the March elections. And then, in case you're wondering, whoever is elected, I really feel, has to run for re-election in March, because those plans take many years to implement, and the superintendent takes many years to take the reins and get acclimated. The experience of being through those two things is something I can really bring to the committee at present. I would actually be the person on the committee that's been through those both.
Okay. Well, I think in talking about the superintendent search in particular, how would you say your insight, or how would you maybe change your the attributes or the characteristics, or what would you be looking for in the new superintendent that would be maybe different because times have changed?
That's a good question.
What would you be looking for?
The times really have changed. In 2004, my committee hired Mr. Hurley as the interim to serve in the 2004-2005 school year and buy us time to do a superintendent search. Bill was the 6th superintendent we'd had since 1990, so we'd had a lot of turnover in the central office. And we were concerned that, first of all, that gave the town a poor reputation for longevity of superintendents, and we also were just concerned that central office functions like the finance department and the personnel department were probably sort of unstable after so many different leaders coming through. So a lot of our desire at the time was to bring in a new leader who would be a decisive person, and we found that in Dr. Ash. It took us, when he came in, we discovered, to make a long story short, that the financial problems particularly were much more serious than we had thought. So it took us about 3 years to straighten that out. By now, town meeting members are used to seeing the school committee return a portion of unused funds, unspent funds to the town every year. In 2006 or 2005, it was a different story. We were asking for money in the middle of the year and so on. Our situation in 2014 is extremely different. It's a very stable system financially, as I just said. Our academic ratings continue to be very high. It's a desirable school district to work in. The town itself has become well known as a well-managed town. We got through the Great Recession, in fact, with rather little effect on the town government. Almost no layoffs, no cuts in services. So the town's reputation is considerably better in 2014. Now I think we're looking for a sensitive listener, a critical thinker, an intellectual leader. We don't need so much of a change agent or stabilizer as we did in 2004.
Well, in anticipating too, you talk about 2014 being somewhat stable. Recent surveys, studies showing that our school population grows by as much as 675 students. That's a pretty big challenge.
It is a big challenge.
So I'll throw it out to you. I mean, what are some of the ways that we deal with that in terms of infrastructure, budgets, and other things? Because we're finally at a place where we are stable, but with that kind of projection, there's got to be some forward thinking.
Well, we certainly need more classrooms and more infrastructure to support those new students over the next 5 years. And the school committee's working really hard right now to put a revision of the plan together. Those plans usually have a planning horizon of 5 years or so. So the major one that we approved when I was chairman, you could think of as taking us through the reconstruction of the Estabrook School. And it would have been in need of an update, even if it weren't for the sudden influx of newcomers.
Right.
We evidently need a couple of dozen more classrooms, not all at the elementary level either, so our our middle schools would be affected as well as the high school.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to prejudge. I don't think anything is off the table, but the likeliest things to me are that we'll need to commit to rebuilding the Hastings School at the earliest possible time. The discussion I hear is really about how large the school should be, not whether to rebuild it. And that's a project with a very long lead time, and it's an expensive project. So in the meantime, I'm sure the school committee will work with the architects and plan to do smaller projects at the elementary and secondary levels. And that will take us out to 2019 or 2020 or so. We are, I'm sure the school committee will find a selection or a solution for the newcomers and be able to welcome them with good classrooms and enough teachers.
I think, you know, as I think back, you know, I'm a graduate of Lexington High School myself, my son was. We've always been there in the top tier, you know, of all of the, when you think about the lists, and whether it's Boston Magazine or the New York Times or Time, whatever, the Newsweek, or one of them just came out and said we're the greatest top 10 schools in the country or something, the high school that is. We're always sort of achieving, we want to be on the sort of the top of the best lists, and I think by and large we're always there. If we're not to the top, we're close to the top, which shows an ongoing commitment. And I found over the years sometimes there's a little bit of an imbalance where the talented and academically inclined students get a lot of attention. We had a whole lot of debate on weighted GPAs and other things.
I remember that. And
then you have students with ed plans that need that attention, but there are a whole class of students in the middle that sometimes people say they go or fall through the cracks, or they don't get the kind of attention that everyone else is getting. I don't know if that's, I know they've dealt with it in the past. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, first of all, I think all the parents in town struggle with the duality of whether I'm pushing my child hard enough to get her into a good college, and at the same time whether I'm creating too much pressure on her. So that's one struggle going on in the minds of just about every parent I've known, including me. As far as the kids in the middle are concerned, I really agree with your concern, and when we see, maybe this relates to the search for a new superintendent, we want a superintendent who's just as proud as he or she should be of our high MCAS scores and high ratings, but there are a lot more questions to ask. How are for one of them is the achievement gap still being closed? So are we providing equal access to our excellent education for all the students in the school, or is there some elite that gets more than their share? Another thing is just whether children have the good study habits and other habits that will lead to success in college and in business. There are lots of students who are scoring well on the MCAS but don't get such good grades, and that's worthy of some investigation and discussion among the faculty also. Not so much, again, not so much a matter to be dictated by school committee policy, but something I'm sensitive about when I hear us, you know, talking so much about our high ratings. I want people to ask more questions and ask
conversations
what's really
at
behind.
Home with family, because like you say, when you point out when the test scores show that they're perfectly capable, but they may not be pulling the grade, sometimes it's more, you know, other ancillary issues.
We should be asking ourselves a lot of questions in those cases.
Well, it should be, it must be interesting running in this campaign with your opponent, Bill Hurley, who you had hired as an interim superintendent back in your earlier years of running for school committee. What is that experience like?
Well, I wish Bill moderate success. Bill and I are actually fond of each other, and we obviously know each other well. I think it's a very interesting election because you have two candidates who feel that way about each other, and I suppose it makes it difficult for some voters to make a choice between us. I just would like to emphasize about myself that I have done this job for 6 years, and I do want to emphasize the school committee is a different job than what I had done before. I was in the computer industry before. It's actually different from being the superintendent of schools also. So we breezed by the question of passing the budget, for example, but when a budget, because that's another thing we have to do by March, when a budget is passed, that means the school committee's job is to do a lot of persuasion and answer a lot of questions to the finance committees, for the members of town meeting. This is not an override year, but if it's an override year, there's a big campaign, a referendum campaign that makes a school committee campaign look small. That's the job of the school committee, not the superintendent has to stay neutral in those matters. Because obviously it's the superintendent's budget and he or she wants the budget to pass, but it might not, the override might fail. So the superintendent has to sort of stay neutral and feed facts and figures to both the yes campaign and the no campaign. It's just a different experience I've had. I've been an activist in several overrides in town and chairman of some of the override campaigns. So the persuasive part of this job is something I'm very used to after 6 years.
So in talking about the school committee and the current members of the school committee, how would you, if you were to be elected, how would you feel that your personalities would blend and mix and work together as a comprehensive unit?
Well, pretty well. I don't really have to speculate about that because I've served with 3 of the members. Judy Crocker and I have known each other since we served together on some town environmental committee in 2004. So I've known these people a long time, and I've served on the school committee with 3 of them. We have to remember that we're all elected people. A third of us are elected every year. We do represent sometimes slightly different constituencies, but and I'm a very passionate education activist. I bring a lot of facts and figures to the table. I don't back down very easily, but for me to get something accomplished means I have to agree with those other people on the committee. That's how you get things done.
Collaboratively.
Yeah,
but you're also passionate about the things you believe in. I've also known you to take a stand for something you believe in and say, yes, we may not have the votes, but it's important to stand up to this.
That's true. I just want to emphasize, though, that for the most part, school committees try to avoid that situation. The strength of a unanimous vote is considerable as long as people have had a fair debate and an open debate. The public has to realize that when they see people disagreeing, as long as they're being factual and not personal, that's the way the democratic process is supposed to work. And that's what guarantees that all the citizens in town are represented too. It helps guarantee that, whether they voted for me or Judy or Sandra or whoever.
Okay. Well, I think I don't know if you had asked the question earlier about the election, that if you were to win in November, would you? Okay, you did.
Yeah, well, he did. He kind of said it in his own way.
Yes,
that he feels like it's actually essential for whoever's running.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine someone being able to do something like hire a superintendent and then go away and not help that person get used to the job, or see the master building plan through. I'm still answering to voters and citizens for aspects of the plan we approved in 2007, and that's as it should be. So it's not a kind of hit and run job.
It's important to have the consistency.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, it's been very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
My pleasure.
Tom, it's always good to see you too.
Same.